Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you today about this series that I call Backstories. And the collection of works that I have here, I didn't read it. So the collection of works that I have here at the museum is called Selections from Backstories, because there are 9 pieces included, and they're just a part of a larger collection that I call Backstories that debuted about a year ago at a gallery in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and where it was a sizable gallery, and I showed I don't know, maybe 25 pieces there. And so I'm going to touch on some of that stuff. Yeah, this was at 108 Contemporary in Tulsa, where the show opened February 7th of last year. And then coming up in September down in Detroit, there's going to be another version of this with everything involved in it. That's going to be at a place called Birmingham Bloomfield Arts Center, where they have large galleries that can accommodate all of this work. And actually I'm working on some newer pieces too that'll end up there. And this is an installation view from the show in Tulsa a year ago. So I'm assuming, maybe wrongly, that all of you have had a chance to kind of check out what's here at the Dennos, the pieces that I have here. Hopefully you have, but if not, we'll go over there after if you want to, and we can talk a little bit. So I'm gonna, instead of assuming that you've seen these, or we'll talk about them later, I'm going to talk about some of the other pieces in the series that are not included here at the museum, because I thought it'd be cool to kind of expand on the stuff. And they all of the work shares the same concept. The pieces vary greatly, as you'll see, but conceptually there's a through line to them. And so I think it makes sense to kind of show you some of the other stuff. Oh, and then after we're done, after I talk about this specific work, I'll talk a little bit about just my practice in general and how I've come to this point in my art practice and so forth. And we can do a Q&A thing too if you have questions. So I'd like to start with a piece that is not here. That's called Snell's Snail. This is Gerhard Snell. In the early 20th century, Snell, a noted mathematician, physicist, and educator, he developed a mathematical theory that explained how forces can work against each other to create equilibrium. To complete this work, he took a 2-year sabbatical from his teaching position at the University of Stuttgart in Germany, but he ended up spending more than 6 years developing it. And in the end, he had developed a groundbreaking mathematical theory that was since named Snell's Snail, and I'll kind of explain why. And his development was used by manufacturers, product designers, in everything from developing pencil sharpeners to fire engines. So it had a lot of applications. And when Snell's theory was plotted on a graph, these 2 humps of its contour resembled a snail to some people. And so that's how it got its name, and it just kind of stuck. Because it makes it easier than some big long technical name people give things like that. He enlisted a sculpture student from the University of Stuttgart to help him build a physical model based on his calculations. And it was an oddly shaped thing and kind of a little awkward, but it ended up being used a lot by commercially, like by manufacturers and engineers and so forth in Europe for quite a while. And this is kind of fun. In 1953, Popular Science magazine did a little 1-page thing about it, and it explains his background a little bit, and they kind of do it in their fun way to entertain youngsters reading this stuff too. So the article told about how he would spend his weekends hiking. I'm not going to go through it too detailed here or anything, but he would go hiking or paddling in a canoe back into some backcountry, and he saw equilibrium in nature that he determined to be based on opposing forces that balance things out, and so that actually really influenced his theory. After his death in 1949, the original snail, that pink object, was actually lost, but it eventually found its way to a place in Baltimore called the Baltimore Museum of Science and Industry, and people would have to go out of their way to find it in the basement inside a glass case. And so that's a little bit of backstory on that one. The next piece that I'd like to talk about that's not here is called Splash, and it's got a really interesting backstory to it. In the spring of 1978, in a small town named Rio Rico in Arizona, which is just north of Nogales, Mexico, Mateo and Maria Ortiz, along with a few other unnamed investors, built and operated a small water park that's called Splash. Now, Rio Rico, you can imagine being that far south, it gets really hot, and there was no public pool, there was nowhere for kids to cool off in the summer, and not really much in the way of family activities at all, which is surprising because Rio Rico's 50,000, maybe not that big, but it's in the tens of thousands of residents in that town. So Mateo had this idea, and he assembled a crew of local tradesmen and laborers, and he created a destination for the families in the town with water activities for the kids. And although it only survived for a little over 20 years, it was a treasured memory for kids in that town who had great times there in the summer. Unfortunately, some financial challenges and some health issues with Mateo forced the park's closure in 1999. And my installation, called Splash, that's a closer view of the facade. So my installation of facade includes a photo, the photo that I took of it, and then a chunk of the original signage that was on the place that I think really kind of encapsulates the vibe of the era that was in, and I particularly like the what time and weathering and has done to the surfaces. So that is Splash. And next is a really interesting piece. It's called Charm. And Charm, in July of 1992, two U.S. Navy seamen noticed an unusual object in the shallow waters off one of their shuttle docks on their, they were stationed in Japan. And after reporting it to their superior, a naval photographer was assigned to photograph this piece. And it wasn't in deep water, but they were a little timid about bringing it up because it resembled in some ways maybe warheads and things like that were used by Japanese troops at one point. Or maybe some people thought it looked like part of a NASA thing that came down and crashed in the water. So it's about 4 feet in length, and it's in really unusual shape, and that's what kind of got their attention. So it was determined that the object should be retrieved and analyzed, and while it wasn't really large or heavy, they were very careful bringing it up out of the water because it was, they didn't know what it was, and they thought it might be dangerous to mess with, right? So even though it wasn't deep, some turbulent water and them being very careful. It ended up taking 3 attempts to bring it up, and hence, well, one of the sailors that was on the team to bring it up, he said after the 3rd try and they brought it up, he said third time's a charm, and so they called it charm, right? So I've got these notes and I've strayed. The early photos of it show these faceted surfaces that, like I say, might have been, they look like a NASA module or something. No one knew. Other people thought it might contain valuable or confidential materials, but that's why they were so careful, bringing it up from the deep. So, and I want to focus on one of these paragraphs. Paragraph 4 is kind of interesting. It says, Charm was transported to Naval Station Mayport, Florida for investigation. Specialists fully documented its painstaking disassembly. It was found to be empty. A committee was formed to determine any potential value that Charm might hold, and all rumors of its origin and contents were laid to rest, and Charm was subsequently pronounced worthless. Despite that, Charm was reassembled, and it has been exhibited numerous times in museums and galleries, both naval and civilian galleries and museums, just for its curious shape and colors and so forth, and its strange history. So that is called Charm. The next piece is a really fun piece called Monkey Box. Monkey Box stands about 4 feet tall, and it has a very unusual shape, and its color is what you can only call banana yellow. That's what I call it. It's mainly constructed of a wood product that you might be familiar with called OSB. It's the cheapest, it's I believe cheaper than plywood even, and it's used in a very utilitarian way for, I think, maybe roofing or underlayment of floors. The piece has these various like steel reinforcements and hinges and so forth, and they're placed on the piece in a really kind of a unusual, eccentric way. And one can only imagine how Monkey Box is actually put to use. But the real story of Monkey Box is told on this steel product plate that's affixed to the side of it. And the product plate is interesting enough that I'm going to read part of it to you here. This unit is fitted with redundant closure systems for your safety. Review usage guidelines annually. This model is not approved for use in Madagascar or Democratic Republic of Congo. Maybe I should read this really fast, like those, the end of a commercial. Exceeding model weight limits invalidates warranty and absolves manufacturer and affiliates from responsibility for any resulting harm. Always secure your loaded transport unit to a pallet or other stable base. For your safety, never attempt to repair a live transport unit. If structure is breached or compromised in any way, discontinue use and replace unit for future missions. Its manufacturer was the Cleveland Specialty Transport Company. So make of it what you will. Here's another really unusual one. It's called Genuine Bean Probe. The title makes perfect sense once I explain it, but it doesn't make sense right now. I know. So the display consists of 2 pieces here. It consists of this brightly colored 3-pronged object, and then a clip from the January 2025 issue of Wanderlust, which is a travel magazine. In a kind of a Ask the Editor page, The text is a letter sent to the magazine asking about objects like this, and I'd like to read a bit of that for you, the question from the person who wrote it. A reader named Janelle S. from Maryland writes, "My husband and I have visited Brazil twice, and we love the people and their culture so much, we plan to go back again next year. After our last trip, I was going through some photos that I shot in Rio de Janeiro, and I noticed a recurring symbol, a colorful three-pronged thingy that seems to show up all over the city. What the heck is it?" And the editor replies, the beam probe, or sonda de, I can't pronounce this, Feao, I think, has become an iconic symbol in Brazilian culture. It's showing up everywhere from carnival to cafes. It has its roots in the local coffee industry, and Brazilians rightfully take great pride in their coffee. I'm a big fan of Brazilian coffee myself. Sometime in the late 1930s, the Brazilians developed a device to agitate coffee beans as they were being roasted. Typically having three prongs connected to a spinning shaft, the bean probe was adopted universally in Brazil, and curiously, nowhere outside of Brazil. So it's a uniquely Brazil phenomenon, right? Originally, they were made of jatoba wood, which is also called Brazilian cherry. It's a beautiful wood, but they're often painted. But actually, most of the time, they were not painted. And what's interesting about this is that the warm coffee beans, the wood would create they would influence the flavor of the roasted coffee in a subtle way. And a lot of people felt at the time that that was this unique Brazilian coffee flavor that other coffee producing nations couldn't imitate. And a lot of people chalked it up to the wood of these bean stirring devices. So over the decades, aluminum ones were made, different designs were made, and the like traditional one went away. And a lot of people were really, like traditionalists were disappointed that it went away because they thought it really defined the Brazilian coffee. Now, the bean probe is usually depicted in bright colors, and it's become a symbol of Brazilian pride, and it's used in many ways. So, for example, this is a float in a huge parade float in Carnival down there. So this is a coffee company, cafe chain in Brazil that the name of this translates to the trembling bean is the name of the coffee, and they've chosen to use a bean probe on their logo. And here's a sample of one of the many tattoos you'll find on these carnival dancers, and not just dancers, people on the streets have these. It's just kind of everywhere. And this one actually translates to keep my beans moving. I love it. Here's a few close-up photos of my genuine bean probe.
Can I ask, is it attached at the bottom? Is that part of it? Is attached at the bottom when it's doing, and it turns around?
You mean that part?
Yeah, I mean underneath.
Yeah, so typically that would be connected to a shaft that
Yeah.
keeps this thing spinning. So now, for a little change of pace, I'm going to do this is still under the umbrella of Backstories, but it's a little bit different. So I don't know if you noticed, but one of the pieces here in the museum incorporates a poem that I wrote too. And I'm new to poetry, relatively new, maybe 2 years I've been writing poetry, but it's interesting because it's kind of working its way into my other pursuits. And so this one also uses a poem, and I'll show how. The title of this poem, not coincidentally, is the same as a popular automobile magazine called American Muscle, which for decades has featured articles about classic American muscle cars. But the ethos of my poem and this magazine couldn't be more different. In the poem, I use the muscle car as a metaphor for America's excesses and for our recent attempts to kind of maintain relevance and power in a changing world. And I'm going to share the poem with you so that you'll see exactly what I mean. When I write poems, a lot of the poems I write, I don't just write them and put them in a drawer. I wanted people to see them. So I came up with this idea to publish them online, but not as written poetry. I aim a camera at myself and I recite the poems. And I found that there's two things really cool about doing that. One is that I get to kind of imbue the poem with a little bit more meaning in the spots I wanted to, because, you know, if person A reads a poem and person B reads a poem, they can be interpreted pretty differently. And I found that if I read it, I get to nudge people a little bit more toward the meaning that I mean for it. And then the other thing that's interesting is I put them on social media, and I have a website for them too. But when I put them on social media, I thought about, like, if you just put a written poem on Instagram, 0.0001% of people are going to read that. Like, they're just going to go buy it, because that's what people are looking for, entertainment more, you know? So I record them and I put them up there, and actually a lot of people who are not even into poetry view these things, and it's kind of cool. So I am incorporating them a little bit. So this is, oh, Craig, we didn't check audio. This has audio.
Oh.
You know, it'll probably come from here, maybe?
It's gonna come out of the, let me just double check the volume.
Oops. Yeah, and so while he's checking that, I wanna just warn you all that there is a swear word in this poem. I bleeped it, but I didn't know if kids might show up at this thing, so I bleeped it out, but you'll get it. We good?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Oh, this is not it yet. Okay. This poem is called American Muscle. Well, it's from here. Oh, America, your naive Boy Scout pride and your popular science ingenuity have birthed a brawny child, an outsized Gerber baby with a purple metal flake flesh, massive and insatiable with a deafening cry. You had your fun, America. You had the deepest tan on Venice Beach, with game show models in bikinis all around. You deposited pounds of rubber at the corner of Woodward and 12 Mile in front of a cheering crowd, got drunk, drove home, and were let off with a warning and a wink. Decades and extinctions later, the world has moved on. But you still measure your aged bravado in decibels and your manhood in miles per hour. A nation's crumbling ego cast in steel. That's you, America, struggling to stay in overdrive. Just another obsolete TV star running on fumes with a dubious hairline and teeth ghost white. While you've been so busy admiring it, your shiny has become irrelevant. Too preoccupied to have looked at the rear view, where you spit out smoke like prophecy,
predicting your own embarrassing last chapter. But your wrinkled old fingers are desperate, clutching the wheel like some fragile dream. America, your engine is coughing so loudly that you can't hear it, but the world is laughing at you. So,
Wow.
thank you. Thank you. So that poem, I want to say that most of my poetry is not that negative and cynical and angry, but you know, I got a little angry in that one, so forgive me. And also, if there are muscle car people here, nothing personal. I just wanted to use that as a metaphor, which I think it works pretty well as a metaphor for, because they're so over the top and so excessive, you know. So anyway, that poem was actually published in American Muscle magazine in the letters to the editor column. I will save how I got that published in that magazine for another talk someday, but anyway, it made it in there, unredacted too. So at this point, I'm assuming that your bullshit detectors have gone off, and I want you to know that they're working just fine, you know. And by now also I'm sure you realize that these works of art are really different than most art you come across. The conceptual aspect of these works has put you in the position of questioning what is and isn't real. Most of the artwork here is centered on a sculpture, and each piece has some mystery woven into it. So as the viewer interacts with it, they learn its backstory, and that's where the title of the exhibition comes from. Sometimes the narrative is pretty involved, like this piece that is here in the museum. And actually, only 10 of these letters you see on the wall, I actually, the full display of this has 20 letters. And they all tell a story of this gentleman who, he's a mysterious guy, and all of the letters, they kind of tie into each other in some ways. They refer to, he went here after there, and he had an affair with the concierge in, Beijing, and then he was in South America, and no one knows if he's an architect or whatever. All of them add up to this kind of a portrait of this mid-century bon vivant who went all around the world. And so that piece is probably the most complex of any of the pieces in this series, because I have seen people spend like 20 or 25 minutes with this, reading these letters and going, wait a minute, so he was in Greece, but then a month later, you can read it like a short story in a way, but it's almost like one of those I don't know what those books are where you can choose your own ending or something like that, because wherever you stop reading, you have that much information about this guy. And in some cases, I really wanted to do a thing where the experience goes beyond the museum walls. So some of the pieces, like this piece out here called Tensioneer, normally the museum's an awkward place to do this, but when I show this piece in galleries, people are invited to take these matchbooks. We've produced thousands of matchbooks, and the QR code on the matchbook leads you to a website that tells the kind of the backstory of these two brothers that started this Tensioneer company. So, and several of the pieces have websites for them that you can kind of get another layer, because I really wanted to do a thing where the experience didn't just end when you walk out the door. There was a reason for you to remember this work the next day when you say, what was that website? And you explore that stuff. And actually, Chelsea Niemi, am I saying her name right? She, from here in the museum, she did a kind of a deep dive into this piece on the museum's Instagram feed a few days ago, and it's really interesting because she has a really interesting way of digging into the piece. It's not really the way I look at art, and I learned something from that, like about different ways to kind of look at art. She goes at it in a really kind of organized way, and it's interesting. So everything I've shown you and everything that's here in the museum is under this umbrella of the Backstories work that I do. All of that has been done in the past 2.5 years or so. Well, I've been making art for a lot longer, and up until that point, my art was just sculpture. It didn't have backstories to it. My goal has been to make beautiful and fascinating objects for people to just walk up to and enjoy, and not necessarily have to read anything or understand anything. Just, I like it when people enjoy my artwork on a visceral level. This work in Backstories is definitely not that. It's more of a intellectual kind of art where you have to interact with it and read things. Most of my art is not like that. This is a piece I did a few years ago called Gravity. So that said, though, I thought it might be interesting for you to hear how this Backstories thing came to me, this idea, because I hadn't done anything like that up until this point. So there were 3 factors, really, I'd say, that came together. The first one is this. Over the years, a lot of my work plays with the idea of functionality, like they might do something, and their aesthetics borrow from things like machinery and product design. It's been a recurring theme of mine. It's just kind of a natural thing that I've done since I was a student, those kind of influences. The second aspect that kind of came together in Backstories is that in addition to my work as a sculptor, I've had a parallel career as a graphic designer. And you can kind of see how that played into this whole Backstories thing. And over the decades of work as a graphic designer, I've developed a real love for design and a skill set to do it. And not just design, but a real love of typography and of illustration. But on the other hand, I've kind of acquired a skepticism about the advertising industry in general, and my role in it as someone who designed these ads. In fact, if you go on Doug Cannell poetry.com, there's a poem, a little bit angry, that one too, about advertising. That poem is called "There Will Be No More Cookies," and it refers to cookies on your browser. So anyway, yeah, I've developed a kind of actually not so much skepticism, almost like a cynicism about it. And over the years, my work in that field that used to feel like I was doing something important. It's now turned into the feeling that I'm just kind of creating content, and content that doesn't really have a lot of value. It's just filling this need to promote products and services, and it's not something my interest in it has waned. And I don't do it very much anymore because of that. We're bombarded by so much information, much of it questionable at best, and that sometimes when I make ads and experience them, I feel like it's manipulation, and I feel like it borders on propaganda sometimes, depending on what you're advertising. And I have to admit that I've been complicit in this thing. I'm pretty jaded about it. But at the same time, I'm kind of amused by some of the tropes and the cliches that are used to so easily convince us of what to buy, who to vote for, what to believe even. So there's a long history, obviously, of this kind of propaganda approach to advertising. So that definitely weighed into my thinking on Backstories too. Because I will say that one could look at my work in Backstories and say that it is manipulative, and I would say guilty, but hopefully it's manipulative in a way that is well-meaning, not trying to piss anyone off, and I kind of liken it to going to see a magic show where this is fake, this is magic, and you sit there and want to be fooled anyway, and you buy into it because it's fun, and I kind of look at this work a little bit that way, where at some point, sometimes it takes 3 or 4 or 5 of these pieces before people go, I get what he's doing now, and then they keep going because it's fun, and it's interesting. So I started formulating these ideas. Before I go on, and I kind of touched on this, but a lot of people feel that we're now really anchored in a post-truth era. And my thinking about that also really weighed into this, because now you don't know what to believe, right? I mean, we have AI, we have revisionist history, we have fake news, we have algorithms feeding us things that may or may not be true. We have scientific fact being questioned, and we have leaders that just lie to us, bald-faced lies. So what do you trust, right? So this work also in some ways touches on that and acknowledges that we're living in an era like that. So Backstories brings those ideas all together, and I kind of stumbled into it. I would say that about halfway through making these pieces, I realized that those were all the things that came into it. It was more of this rough idea at first, but I honed it and figured out what it's about along the way. So when I started thinking about this, I also wanted to make art. I realized that with my skill sets as a graphic designer and as a sculptor, that I had an opportunity with this idea to make art that is unlike anything I had ever experienced. And I still have not found any art that does this thing that this work does. If it's out there, I want to see it. So I'm crowdsourcing. If anybody, but it's just a kind of a novel approach, and I wanted to do it almost as much just because it's unusual as because I thought it was a good idea. And also I wanted to make artwork that doesn't just comment on the current state of our nation and our culture, but it holds a mirror up to people, up to you, when you see this work, to ask yourself where you draw the line on what you believe and so forth. But don't get me wrong, this work's not entirely about false information. There are other conventions that I also wanted to challenge. So one of them is, how when you go to a museum or an art gallery, if you're like me, you spend a lot of time with some pieces, and some pieces you just look at for 10 or 20 seconds and move on. And actually, a lot of museums, much of the work in there I do that with, and it's because, if you go to the MoMA, how much time do you have, right? So you're walking by a lot of work, and take a picture and move on, right? So I wanted to make work that had a real payoff if people spent time with it. And so these pieces, some of them, obviously you can spend a lot of time, some of them only take a few minutes, but the object that's central to the installation is just kind of the half the story. And if you stick around and dig into it a little, there's a payoff. And I really wanted to do that and make stuff that people could spend a little time with. And I know there are people, and I've seen them everywhere I've shown this work, who walk by and look at it and their head kind of tilts sideways, and then they move on and they go look for a painting or something, right? And I'm okay with that. Like, I get that it's not for everyone, but I feel like the level of engagement that these offer to people who do spend time is worth it. And if you think about it, all art's kind of like that. There's no art that turns everyone on, and if it did, it would be so vanilla that, like, is it really doing anything new? Is it really that interesting, you know? Another thing that I set out to do with this work is to make work that's fun. And when you think about fun, it's not a word that you really associate with art that much. A lot of art is really serious business, and it's a big social message, and it's even if it's not messagey, it's still serious stuff. It's not about having fun. I like the fact that these are fun pieces, and that when people explore them, it's almost fun like reading a story or watching a movie, where it's enjoyable to explore it and find out the plot, you know? And my most satisfying moments with this work is when I get to kind of be a fly on the wall and watch people digging into it, and I see them doing that kind of scratching their head thing, and then there's this aha moment, and they usually get a big smile on their face because they get what's going on there, and it's really satisfying to me, and also to just give people something, an experience in a museum that they probably haven't had before. So anyway, I think that everyone would probably agree that these pieces blur a lot of lines, the lines between sculpture and installation, lines between functionality and abstraction, lines between art and craft and design, and even lines between what we may or may not believe about the things we see and read. So I hope you enjoy the work, and if you have questions, I thought maybe we could take a walk down there to where the work is, and if you want to hang out and talk to me about the pieces out there, that would be great. And if you don't, thanks for coming.